Hey there, welcome into Unpaid Interns on this Friday afternoon, January 15th. And boy, I am ready for some football this weekend. And luckily for all you that are excited for the NFL, we have you covered today. Very excited to have Lindsay Jones of The Athletic covering the NFL, a senior writer for The Athletic, joining us today. Lindsay, thanks you so much for coming on today.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me on.
And it's been a really interesting NFL season, obviously, amongst the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, before we delve into some of both the coaching changes we've seen and the playoffs coming up this weekend, I just wanted your thoughts on covering the league amongst the pandemic. And also competitively, I think the league has had more parity than we've seen really in the last couple years.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting year. I mean, if you would have asked me back in August, probably if we would be here in whatever we are, January 15th, divisional round weekend, without a single game having to be canceled. There were some ugly moments. There were some really rough moments. There were a couple points, real inflection points this season where you really wondered, is this going to happen? Are they going to be able to keep going? And somehow they have. And, the NFL was in a really interesting spot this year based on just their calendar, where in the spring they had the luxury of time where there wasn't anything that happened on the NFL calendar in March, April, May, really June even, that couldn't be moved virtually, while the other pro sports all had to either figure out how they were going to play in a bubble, if they were going to have to cancel games, postpone games, delay their entire postseason. And now the NFL is kind of back in this position where they were for a long time the only pro sport that was playing, and so they were taking a lot of shots of from around the world, around pro sports, about what a mess, the NFL is messing this up, I can't believe they're doing this. And all of a sudden the other pro sports are back, and the NBA is dealing with some major COVID issues now that they're not in a bubble. The NHL is having some pretty significant COVID challenges already. I'm sure Major League Baseball is going to be right in that. And I don't want to congratulate the NFL too much, I don't want to pat them on the back too much, but they did make it work. And there were a couple outbreaks, but they've managed to kind of survive this, if that's even an okay word to use. But it's been really crazy. I mean, from a reporting perspective, it's been really challenging. I mean, everything about our jobs is different. The way we cover these teams, the way we go to games. I mean, I've covered 3 games this season in Denver, where I live, just driving a few miles up the highway to go to the stadium here. I haven't been on a plane since the combine. Normally I would be at a game last weekend, but wild card round, I would probably actually be in a city reporting this week and covering a game this weekend. And I'll be writing about all the games this weekend, but I'll be doing it from my couch instead of at a game, and same a championship game weekend. So it's been very different, but I think the games have largely been really good. There have been a handful of games that haven't been. I was at one of them. I was at that Broncos Saints game where they played without quarterbacks. The Broncos completely played without quarterbacks. The other quarterback was Taysom Hill, which you could argue was also playing without a quarterback. So I saw the worst game of the year, but there have been some really good games, and I don't think the quality of play has been lacking at all. And barring some sort of knock on wood, wherever, I don't know, under this counter, barring some sort of breakdown over the next 2 weeks, we should get a really good slate of playoff games without, hopefully without any other major COVID interruptions like we've seen over the last couple months.
Just on the competitive side of things, I kind of mentioned it. It feels like this year there's been a lot of parity across the league. Not too many really, really great teams that have dominated outside of probably the Packers and the Chiefs, but also not too many bad teams. Why do you feel like the reason is this season that we've just seen so much parity across the league?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've lost home field advantage. So I think that's been part of it, that some of these teams that tend to really excel, they really get a bonus from where they play, the crowd, all of that sort of stuff. That's really gone away. I mean, home teams were basically 500 this year, yes, just slightly over. So home field advantage has gone away. It's going to be really interesting to see how home field advantage and empty stadiums, if that plays a role into the playoffs, because some of these places are going to be, I'm not sure if any of the home stadiums this weekend are going to be completely empty. I mean, Green Bay will be close to empty. I think they may have like a small group of family and friends that are going to be allowed. New Orleans will have a small amount. Buffalo is going to have about 6,700 fans. And which game am I missing? What's the other game? Oh, Arrowhead. And Arrowhead will have the biggest crowd of any of the the groups this weekend. They've had fans this whole year. They'll probably be in the close to 20,000 is what I think they're going to have. So there are going to be fans there, but we are moving into now where Green Bay's best home field advantage is its weather. Buffalo also has a pretty significant advantage. They're going to have snow potentially this weekend for their game against the Ravens. Arrowhead tends to get real cold, real windy, so they could have an advantage there. Although the Browns, they played in the worst weather of anybody this year. They went that stretch where they were playing in like monsoons week after week after week in cold and wind. So that's not going to be a shock to the Browns like it is for the Rams going to Lambeau Field, for example. But I mean, I think when we talk about parity, I mean, I don't think this was a year that teams were able to make like tremendous strides. I mean, I really thought that this was going to be a year that the teams that had solid infrastructure, returning coaches, returning quarterbacks, coordinators, play callers, a lot of stability, the teams that were good were going to separate from the other teams. And I don't think when you look at kind of who's in the playoffs right now, there's not a ton of surprises. I mean, I think there have been a couple teams that have maybe been able to make a bigger jump than expected, given all of the COVID related challenges. I think the Bills are probably one of those. The fact that Josh Allen has made this really tremendous leap from year 2 to year 3 in a year where he didn't have an off season. He wasn't, and he didn't have an off season with a brand new number 1 wide receiver, all of those sorts of things. So that's been really impressive out of Josh Allen. But, but I think defense have maybe regressed a little bit. I think the rules have worked in offense's favor that have maybe enabled these games to be more competitive. I mean, but I think you're right that there has been a lot of parity. But now we're at the point of the year where the really good teams, I think, are going to separate themselves. And there are a lot of the good teams that we were kind of expecting that would be here at this point.
And before we get really into the playoffs, there was a big coaching hire last night. Urban Meyer will be the next head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. You were just telling me you were on the Zoom call, introductory Zoom call with Urban Meyer. I mean, there's been a lot of rumors with a lot of top college football head coaches. Most of them seem like they never make the leap. Meyer finally did it. I guess why now? And is he in a situation to be set up for success? Because it feels like everywhere he's gone, he's had success in his career.
Yeah, I mean, he has won everywhere he's been, going back to Bowling Green, University of Utah, University of Florida. Actually, I covered Urban Meyer at the University of Florida way back, very long time ago. I don't even want to know how old you were when I was covering the University of Florida, but it will make me feel ancient. But 2007 was when I was in Gainesville. It was Tim Tebow's Heisman season. So I covered Urban way back in the day. So I was actually talking to my editors. I'm like, I wonder if he remembers me. Someday when I get to get on a plane and go to a facility, if he remembers my brief foray as a UF beat writer when I was at the Palm Beach Post. But so I kind of have a history covering Urban. I've watched him closely kind of throughout the rest of where his career went. I very quickly went to the NFL after that to start covering the Broncos and then the NFL. But, he's always been one of those names who's come up when you talk about coaching cycles. And on the Zoom today, his introductory press conference with Jacksonville, he said that he first started thinking of it about 10 years ago. That was when he first really started getting calls from NFL teams, wondering if he might be interested in doing what Pete Carroll did, because it was about 10 years ago. I mean, Pete Carroll has been in the NFL with the Seahawks now for a really long time, but he was a very prominent college head coach to make the jump. Yes, he had been in the NFL previously, but he had really kind of made his name at USC and was so successful at USC. So it was kind of becoming a thing again where, okay, who are these best college coaches who might be suited personality wise, who has the right offense that might fit? And, Urban Meyer was at Florida and then at Ohio State. I mean, it was just an NFL factory in terms of the prospects that they were producing. I mean, so many first round picks from both of those programs. And, I think lost in this is how good of an offensive coach he is. And, he was really, really innovative and transformative to college football, in the early to mid 2000s with the schemes that he was running, the stuff that he did with Alex Smith at Utah. And, he was really kind of on the front end of a lot of, the changes that went on to college football that are now in the NFL. So that a lot got lost when it was Urban Meyer, CEO of Ohio State, really, But, I think this was a situation where Jacksonville is going to offer him a ton of power. I mean, Shad Khan said it today. It's going to be a coach-centric team. They still haven't hired a general manager. Urban Meyer is going to be involved in that hiring process, which means he's going to have a ton of power. They'll both report to the owner, but we know what the power structure is going to be there, right? I mean, Urban Meyer wasn't going to go somewhere where he didn't have roster control, where he wasn't the guy calling the shots on who the draft picks were going to be, who was going to make the roster, all of those sorts of things. So he has that in Jacksonville. He has, I mean, geographically, location, it makes a ton of sense. His family still has a home in North Florida. He's comfortable there. They have, the way he left Florida wasn't necessarily the smoothest, but time has healed a lot of that. And I think a lot of, Gators fans in North Florida and the Jacksonville area still have very fond memories of the 2 national championships that he brought to the Gators. So, it's a comfortable place for him. And, one of the big questions that none of us can answer right now, and Urban is going to be asked about, and I don't think he truly can answer too, is his health, how it's going to hold up. I mean, he dealt with a lot of significant, very real health issues, both at University of Florida and when he was at Ohio State, that really led to him not being able to coach anymore. A lot of it was stress-induced. He had a lot of headache issues. The NFL calendar might be better for him. It's not a 24/7 recruiting cycle. He, we'll see. Will he be a better delegator now? Can he kind of just be that CEO guy and not have to be on this 24/7, 365 recruiting? You don't have the pressure. Look, in Jacksonville, you are not going to have the pressure to go undefeated, right? He's going to lose a lot. I mean, this is not a team that's set up to make the playoffs next year. I mean, you potentially could. I mean, I think that AFC South is a really interesting division, but, I just think there's a lot to like there in terms of, fit, power, location, and then really the stuff that they have moving forward. They have a ton of salary cap space. They obviously have the number 1 overall pick in the draft, but they also have a lot of draft picks. So it's not just that you're going to be able to get Trevor Lawrence or, he kind of played coy today about the quarterbacks. He talked about Zach Wilson and Justin Fields, and obviously the Ohio State connections with Justin Fields will make the next couple months a little more interesting. I mean, I think we would all be stunned if it's not Trevor Lawrence, but, it's just really a setup for if you want to take a job that is going to be set up to be a successful rebuild, that's a place to do it. The problem is that Jacksonville doesn't really have the history of doing that. I mean, this is a place that needs a complete cultural overhaul. They really need to learn to win. They need to engage their fan base. They need to, they've had a lot of things working against them. I mean, I think they've averaged like just under 4 wins a year. I mean, they need a lot of work, but I guess we'll see if it's going to work. I mean, it could be a tremendous failure. I have no idea how it's going to play out, but from somebody who just likes storylines and chaos and drama, I think it'll be really interesting to watch.
It's going to be really fun to watch what's going to happen in Duval County. That's for certain. And now as we look back towards the playoffs and, you look at the Jags, a team that's really not had much playoff success or any success in the last 20 years. Well, this year it's been interesting in the playoffs. We've seen 3 teams in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Cleveland Browns, and the Buffalo Bills that really haven't had any success even getting to the playoffs in the last 20 years. All have a lot of success, all playing this weekend. How has this happened that we've seen some really dormant franchises really rise up? And what does it kind of mean for the NFL that we're maybe seeing a little bit of a changing of the guard?
Yeah, well, young quarterbacks. I mean, the thing that's so fun about this weekend slate is that the NFC has the old quarterbacks, right? We've got Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, and then Jared Goff, who is not an old quarterback, but it could have been Russell Wilson, I guess, would have been the other potential guy in there who's 32, which is crazy to me that Russell Wilson is like an older quarterback now at 32. But then, I mean, it's really this, we've been waiting for kind of this new guard of quarterbacks, this passing of the torch. And we're seeing it now that it's not just a lot of potential. It's guys that are transforming their teams, that are advancing into the playoffs, making significant playoffs runs. I mean, now Josh Allen has his first playoff win. Lamar Jackson has his first playoff win. Baker Mayfield has a playoff win. And you look at the way that each of those teams are built, and none of it feels fluky. Like the expectation is that all of those teams should be built for some long-term success now. That's not to say that I expect all of those teams to win this week. I mean, obviously Buffalo and either Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen is going to be in the AFC Championship game. I think it would be a pretty significant upset if the Browns were to go into Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs. But, there's just, this group of young quarterbacks from the 2017 and 2018 draft class are just so impressive. And these teams are really building around the young quarterbacks. I mean, we very clearly there's two ways, right, to win in the NFL right now. There's two blueprints. That's to have a Hall of Fame veteran quarterback, a Aaron Rodgers, a Drew Brees, or you go out and get that guy like Tom Brady, or you build around your young quarterback while he's on his rookie deal. You invest everything in him, coaching wise, scheme wise. You go out and make big moves to acquire a guy like Stephon Diggs in Buffalo. In Baltimore, it was so much about just building their entire offense to cater to Lamar Jackson. And they have had some dips along that journey. I wish they would invest a little bit more in personnel, receivers especially to help him out. But I just think it's really fun to watch. And we are very much at this changing of the guard because, for Drew Brees especially, this might be it. Right. I mean, their window might be closing right now for the Saints. And if they don't make the Super Bowl this year, does he retire? Today, January 15th is actually his 42nd birthday. He's had so many health challenges. He clearly has been showing some signs of decline in his play and his arm strength and all of that, really over the last year or so. So you have to wonder, would he come back and play at 43? The Saints are going to be in a major salary cap mess next season, especially if the cap falls all the way down to 175 million, which is the potential salary cap floor. The Saints are going to be in a real big mess. So we're really at the changing of the guard now, where it's these young quarterbacks leagues, and we might get Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, and that would be fun as hell for everybody to watch, right? But I think it's going to become much more the norm that we're seeing some of these young quarterbacks facing off in the biggest games of the year.
You mentioned the Browns, a team that many people are paying attention to here in the Midwest, where many of our listeners listen to the Unpaid Interns podcast. And you mentioned they have a very challenging matchup against the Chiefs, but they were certainly underdogs against the Steelers, forced 4 turnovers, got out to a big lead. That's been quite a turnaround in Cleveland. How is Kevin Stefanski, in your mind, covering that team? I mean, made that turnaround, and what do they need to do on Sunday to have a chance in Arrowhead Stadium against a very talented Chiefs team?
Yeah, I mean, talent over the last couple of years hasn't necessarily been the Browns' issue, right? I mean, we all headed into the 2019 season. I'm guilty of it. I went out to Browns training camp in Berea, Ohio for a few days back in the August of 2019, because that was just this massive collection of talent. That was, OBJ had just arrived, and Kareem Hunt. They had signed Kareem Hunt, even though he was going to serve a suspension, but Myles Garrett and Olivier Vernon, and they were just amassing so many players. And so you thought, okay, this is the year. But it just is such a reminder that it's to win in the NFL. It's about a lot more than just having talent and amassing a super team. And it was the wrong coaching staff. Freddie Kitchens was not the right guy for that job. Baker Mayfield, I think at that point was probably just also maybe not quite ready to lead that sort of collection of guys. And they really just needed a different infrastructure, right? They just needed a different leadership. And Kevin Stefanski has been completely the right guy to have in there. He's so steady. His personality is perfect. His personality is perfect for Cleveland, for that fan base, but he's perfect for what that team needs. They don't need kind of a wild card guy. They need a guy who's going to really establish a culture of, this is who we are. This is our offensive identity. We're going to run the ball. We're going to be built through our offensive line, through our defensive line. We're not going to get too high. We're not going to get too low. We're not going to make excuses for anything. We're not going to make we're not going to wear crazy t-shirts. We're just going to figure out who we are and how we want to win. And what's been kind of cool to watch is that we know now exactly who the Cleveland Browns are. And they're certainly not a perfect team. I think Baker Mayfield has had some bad games. There's some, significant areas on their roster that need help. Their defensive secondary has some issues, especially their safeties. But we know who they are. We know how they want to win games. And they want to beat you up front. They want to run with probably the best running back tandem in football with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. And that works for them. And having that sort of offense where it's built on that offensive line and Chubb and Hunt, and not on the flashy wide receiver duo or trio and this passing game, I think it's really worked for them. And, they've been a better teams after Beckham got hurt, which is kind of crazy. I'm very curious what his long-term future is going to be there. I love Jarvis Landry. I mean, he is he's just so fun to watch. He works so hard. He's so smart. He's such a good leader for that team. So I just think that they really have the right balance now of players. And then when you look at this matchup, though, you heading into Arrowhead Stadium, and only one team has beaten the Chiefs in more than a calendar year. It's been back since I guess they lost they lost to the Raiders early this season, and then they had the previous last loss was in like November of 2019. So the way that you hang with the Chiefs is you try to take possessions away from them. You run the ball a lot. You try to keep games close. You just try to dominate time of possession, all of those sorts of things. And the Browns can do that. You got to force Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs to make some mistakes. And you have to play good red zone defense. You have to try to, hold them to field goals, limit some of their possessions, because they can score in so many different ways, and they can score so fast. So I think the Browns are set up that they can keep a game close, that they can steal possessions away from the Chiefs. It would be naive and unrealistic for any of us to expect that Mahomes is going to throw 3 interceptions, or that the opening snap of the game is going to go over his head. The type of stuff that the Steelers did when they really kind of handed the first half of that game to Cleveland the other night, that's not going to happen, right? I mean, they'll be lucky if they can get Patrick Mahomes to throw 1 pick, maybe 2. I mean, it's so rare that he has a multi-interception game. So, you really have to take advantage of those opportunities. The trouble, though, with that sort of game plan of we're going to run the ball a lot, we're going to dominate time of possession, we're going to limit Patrick Mahomes' opportunities, is that we know what Patrick Mahomes does if a game is close. It's very well established. The Chiefs do not lose close games. They win close games or they win blowouts. So, you better hope that you can build some sort of a lead, because if it's close at the end, it's just kind of one of those, like, we've seen this movie a lot of times before, and you kind of have a feeling how it's going to end. So, I'm excited for that game, though. I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup. There's a lot of kind of interesting storylines, a lot of drama. You've got Kareem Hunt going back to Kansas City for the first time since the Chiefs cut him after all of his off-field issues and kind of his issues with with ownership and management. So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. I'm excited for all 4 games this weekend. I think there's a lot of really intriguing storylines in each of them.
And you look on the NFC side of things, the Packers, maybe not as dominant as the Chiefs, but they have certainly been the best team in the regular season in the NFC. With Aaron Rodgers certainly still playing at a high level, should they be the heavy favorite to make it to the Super Bowl? And you talked about how a team can best beat the Chiefs. How should the Rams and potentially, if they beat the Rams, an opponent in the NFC Championship game, in either the Saints or the Bucks, try to go at it and knocking off the Packers?
Yeah, I mean, I think the NFC is more wide open. I don't think there's a kind of like a clear favorite necessarily. I mean, I think the Packers definitely deserved to be the number 1 seed, but I think you could make a pretty strong case or strong argument for, at least for the Packers, the Saints, and the Bucks to end up coming out. I think the Rams have a little bit harder of a road, just what they've been facing offensively. Their worst losses, their bad games have been as bad as anybody's bad games in the NFL. I mean, their loss to the Jets, when they really just imploded, their loss to the Dolphins was really, really ugly. So I don't want to count out a team that was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, a team that has 2 of the best defensive players in football, in Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, from being able to make a run. But I just think what they're facing is a little bit more challenging than maybe the other 3 teams. But yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the Packers, you just have to see that you have the MVP quarterback. I mean, it hasn't been announced, but it would be a stunner at this point if Aaron Rodgers is not the MVP, based on the way that the all-pro voting went for quarterback at the quarterback position. So Aaron Rodgers is going to be the MVP. He's going to deserve it. He's had his best statistical season ever. His metrics are all better than his previous MVP seasons. Part of that, the game keeps adapting to make it even more quarterback friendly, but he passes the eye test too. It's not just like looking at all of his numbers, even his advanced stats. And the connection between him and Devontae Adams right now is insane. I mean, they're bordering on kind of like historic quarterback wide receiver duos right now. Just this connection that they have, and just how dangerous they are. That's the best matchup of the week. Maybe most interesting kind of like schematic matchup is Rodgers and LaFleur against Brandon Staley and that Rams defense, because the Rams defense, when they are at their best, they are smothering. They are frustrating. They're creative. They're really, really hard to attack because they can do so many different things. And when you have a cornerback like Jalen Ramsey, who can match up in man coverage, or he can play up at the line of scrimmage, he can play in zone, he can play man. He's one of the best trash talkers in the NFL. I mean, he gives you a ton of flexibility. And then you have a guy like Aaron Donald, even with some sore ribs, he's a game wrecker. And it's going to be a huge challenge for a Packers offensive line that has largely played really, really well this year to handle Aaron Donald and Michael Brockers, who's played pretty well. Leonard Floyd has been a nice kind of addition as an edge rusher there. So, I think it's going to be a big challenge. I mean, I think the Rams defense might be the biggest challenge the Packers will face potentially in this postseason, but I'm going to have to give the edge. Playing at Lambeau Field, it's going to be really cold. Jared Goff still has, he's got screws in his thumbs, still some swelling there. Their offense hasn't really been clicking and high scoring lately. So, I think the Packers do win that game. And if they do win that game, and the NFC Championship game is against the Bucs or the Saints at Lambeau Field in January, I mean, that's going to be a nice edge for the Packers.
Well, one game we haven't touched on yet, so I want to get your thoughts real quick on the Bills and Ravens. Maybe the biggest toss-up of the weekend. There's definitely not a favorite in that game. You mentioned Josh Allen has really been playing some good football for Buffalo. What do you feel like is the key in that game? And obviously Lamar Jackson finally got the monkey off his back, got his first playoff win last week.
Yeah, I mean, I got asked this question in my mailbag that posted up on The Athletic this morning about what game did I think was the most entertaining, and I picked this game, the Ravens-Bills game, because I think you're completely right, Griffin, that it is unpredictable. I think you could tell me almost any potential outcome, and I would say, yeah, that's reasonable, right? I think why this game is entertaining is because both quarterbacks are so highly watchable, so highly unpredictable. I think the potential for viral plays from both quarterbacks is super high, and that's on both ends of the spectrum. That's the oh my God, I can't believe he just did that. Did you see what Lamar Jackson just did? I mean, he had one of those runs, his touchdown run last weekend against Tennessee. Josh Allen has those plays regularly, the type of throws that he makes, how he's able to throw on the run, how hard he is to tackle. I mean, he had that play against against the Colts, against the Colts last week in his touchdown throw where he was being drugged down and he was almost all the way to the ground, kind of did his that sidearm touchdown throw to their tight end. And so the potential for ridiculous plays from the quarterback, but these quarterbacks both can make mistakes and both can make really costly, bad mistakes. And, the way that we've seen the Ravens lose in the past is when Lamar Jackson has thrown interceptions. And that's how the Titans beat them last week. That's how the Titans thought they were going to beat them last year. And that's how the Titans thought they were going to beat them this year. Josh Allen is prone to one of those really big, oh my God, what did he just do? Mistakes per game. So that certainly could happen. Weather is going to be a factor potentially in this game. Looks like there might be snow in the forecast in Buffalo. So I just think it could get really weird and wild and probably really fun. So, and I think that's the Packers Rams is the first game of the weekend, but that one is completely a toss up to me. I'm going to give the Bills the edge just from the weather aspect, being at home, being prepared to play in those sorts of conditions, and how well I think Josh Allen can play in adverse conditions. But the Ravens were so hot late in the year that I feel bad picking against them. But, if you have to pick one, I'm going to pick the Bills.
Well, before I have you make some final playoff predictions, you put something out on The Athletic a little bit earlier in the week about really enjoying the Nickelodeon broadcast of the Bears and Saints game last Sunday. Why did you enjoy it so much? And is that something that you feel like the NFL might try again in regular season or playoff games in the future?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a mom. I have a 4-year-old, and I've spent a lot of time watching football with her this year and trying to engage her with my life and my job. And I watch a lot of games. And it was just kind of this nice reminder of that football doesn't have to be this exclusive, for people who are really into analytics or people who are really into like offensive line and defensive line play and schematics, and that there's a lot of fun stuff that goes into these games, and that it is a game, right? And it was just kind of refreshing to have something different to watch. And I did watch it with my daughter, and I usually don't spend Sundays watching football with her. Usually she is with her grandparents so that I can work, but I specifically went out of my way to spend Sunday afternoon with her to watch that game because I just wanted to see like how she liked it. And she's still a little young. She's not quite 4.5. So she doesn't really get a lot of like the intricacies of football, but she liked the graphics. She liked the slime. She liked the cartoons, the neon colors. And I just really appreciated that they didn't treat it as like a hokey thing for kids. It was literally just like, what questions are new football watchers, and especially kids, probably kids who are a little bit older than my daughter. It was probably geared more to like the 8 to 12 range instead of 4. But what are they going to ask? And she asked. I mean, I watch a lot of football with her now, and a lot of times it's like literally laying in her bed at night. We're on Mountain Time, so the second half of the primetime games are kind of right in the middle of bedtime. So I'll let her watch a little bit on my phone as as we're doing bedtime. And she asked really cute questions about like, what happened there? Who is that player? She asked their numbers, like who is 56, or why did he just fall down? Or, oh no, did he get hurt? What happened? Or, why are they kicking the ball? Like those sorts of things. And I thought Nick did a really good job of just explaining things in a non-condescending way, just explaining that like this is what a first down is, or trying to put a red zone into a relatable into relatable terms. So it was fun, and I definitely think it's something that's we'll see more of. I don't think it's something we'll see on like a weekly basis, but it was a much bigger success than I think anybody at the NFL or Nickelodeon or CBS, Viacom expected when they made the deal back in the spring. So now I think we'll definitely see that as part of the expanded media packages. And we're just at a point now where, there's so many different ways that we consume sports, and especially consume the NFL. It's so rare that you would just sit down and watch one game on one television channel, and that's the only way that you do it. We all want options. We're all on Twitter, we're all streaming, we're watching on our phones, we're watching on our computers. We want options, and they can give options now, and it doesn't have to be crazy expensive to have a different audio feed. I've spent time with Andrea Kramer and Hannah Storm, and they're the first all-female duo who broadcast the Thursday night games for Amazon. There's a UK feed, there's a film room feed on those Thursday night games where you can just appeal to a lot of different audiences who maybe want a different viewing experience than what, Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels are going to give you.
All right, well, let's get some predictions. We got 4 games this weekend, and then the championship games in the AFC and the NFC. So who are your 2 teams you think that are going to make the Super Bowl?
So I think it's still, I think it's going to be the Chiefs and the Packers, which is boring. It's chalk, but I do think that they're the 2 best teams, and you've got the 2 best quarterbacks. I don't want to get I don't feel super confident in it just because weird stuff has happened all year, and the NFC, like I said, is pretty wide open. But I feel like those are the 2 teams that we're going to see in Tampa. So yeah, Chiefs, Packers.
And I know you got to go, but really quickly, there are a lot of students at the media school who watch this, and I'm a journalist media member myself. Just wanted quickly your advice for journalists, media members out there who are looking to get into high-profile jobs like you eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of stuff. So obviously, being in journalism school, that's a pretty good start. It doesn't have to be the only path. I mean, I didn't go to a major journalism school. I went to Emory University in Atlanta, where we have D3 sports, but I did get a journalism major. Worked at my campus newspaper, all that sort of stuff. But so being in journalism school is important. Getting real world reporting experience is so important because there's a million places right now, right, that you can publish, that you can kind of write your thoughts about teams or analysis on games and stuff. But there's not a ton of places where you can get real world reporting experiences. So while you're in college, get credentialed, go cover the women's golf team, go cover club lacrosse. I mean, hopefully you get chances to cover the football team, men's basketball, women's basketball, all those like the bigger sports, but the reporting experience that you can get on any sort of beat, take those opportunities, learn how to build sources, cover games right on deadline, get real, get real life clips. I've been active in some internship programs in the past, and that's the thing that tends to separate candidates, right? Are people who are turning in class assignments or blog posts that they self-publish versus people who are turning in their real live clips from their campus newspaper, from their internships. Also apply for internships. It's huge. It's obviously a very competitive space, but that real life newsroom experience is just, it's so important. And then the other thing I would say, which, you mentioned high profile jobs, is don't necessarily race to cover the NFL or the NBA. There's so much good storytelling that can be done all across sports, right? I mean, it's covering high school football, high school basketball, high school soccer. There's probably some youth sports. I mean, I covered high school football for several years in South Florida, and I wouldn't trade that experience for anything in terms of the conversations that you get to have with coaches, the in-depth reporting you get to do, and the stories that are available there in the preps, in youth sports that nobody else is telling. I mean, there's a million people, well, not this year because of COVID, but there's a million people that are going to be covering the Super Bowl and are going to be writing about the Super Bowl. But there might be 2 people that are writing about high school football in your town. And that just gives you a million stories that are available to tell. And also just really good, like learning football, learning how to take stats during a football game, learning how to write on deadline, in old press boxes and file stories and stuff. So, I think it's great to have the end goal of I want to cover the Super Bowl, I want to cover the NFL, I want to cover the NBA finals, be an NBA beat writer, whatever it is. But don't necessarily think that that there's not valuable experiences along the way to get there. And if your first job is covering high school soccer somewhere, say, great, I'm going to be the best damn high school soccer reporter, and I'm going to find the best stories and learn how to write and learn how to report. And that's going to really set the foundation for the steps that you're going to take after that.
Definitely great advice. And I really appreciate all your analysis of the NFL. We're all really excited to watch some football this weekend. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that will do it for today's episode of Unpaid Interns. Thanks so much to Lindsay Jones of the Athletic NFL for coming on today, helping us preview the weekend in football. We'll be back with another Unpaid Interns episode on Monday. Really excited to talk with the head coach of Indiana Volleyball, Steve Aird. You can catch that episode live on the IU Sports Media YouTube and Twitter channel at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday. Of course, if you missed any of our Unpaid Interns episodes, you can always check them out on the IU Sports Media YouTube or Twitter pages, or you can listen to them wherever you get your podcasts. That's going to do it for today's episode. For Lindsay Jones, I'm Griffin Epstein. Thanks so much for watching. We'll talk to you again on Monday.